I want you to really try and picture the Northumberland Strait at night. And I do not mean some calm, picturesque summer evening where you can, see the stars reflecting off this glassy surface.
Right, right. We're talking about something entirely different.
Exactly. I want you to picture this body of water in the absolute dead of winter, or actually maybe even during that brutal, just unforgiving transition in late autumn.
Oh, yeah, when the air is literally turning to ice, but the sea hasn't quite frozen over yet. It's a nasty time.
It is. And you are standing there on the very edge of the land, looking out over that huge expanse that separates Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia to Brunswick. And it is dark.
And we need to be really clear about the kind of darkness we're talking about here.
Yes, because it's not just, the absence of a street lamp.
Yeah.
It is this heavy, crushing, just suffocating blackness.
It's the kind of dark that honestly seems to swallow the very air around you. It presses right against your eyes until you actually start to question your own depth perception.
Right. You can't even tell where the land ends and the sky begins. And the water out there, it's freezing. It is this hostile, churning mass.
It's the kind of cold that does not just chill your skin. It feels like it could literally shatter your bones.
Yeah. And the wind is howling down from the northeast. It's ripping across the tops of the waves, and it brings with it this bitter, coppery promise of a violent storm. I mean, it is a terrifying environment where human beings simply do not belong.
No, they don't. It is an environment that actively and violently rejects human life.
That's a great way to put it.
The Northumberland Strait, under those specific conditions, is not merely a setting,
Yeah.
It is an apex predator.
Wow. Yeah, an apex predator.
Think about it. If you were to fall into those waters, your survival time would not be measured in hours. It wouldn't even be measured in half hours.
They'd be minutes.
Agonizing minutes. Your muscles would seize immediately. Your breath would be driven straight from your lungs by the sheer shock of the cold.
Just instant physiological panic.
Exactly. And the absolute darkness would disorient you instantly. It's a place of profound, terrifying isolation. You are at the total mercy of thermodynamics and just the ocean's immense, uncaring weight.
And that isolation, that specific vulnerability, is really key to everything we were exploring in our deep dive today. Absolute darkness, total vulnerability. Until suddenly, out in that pitch black void, a light appears.
Just a single point of light in the middle of nowhere.
Right. And at first, maybe you think it's just a speck, like maybe a trick of your straining eyes or a hallucination born out of that biting wind. But then it grows.
It starts taking a very specific shape.
It really does.
Yeah.
Out of the howling wind and the freezing spray, a ship materializes. And it's not just any boat. It is a massive, beautiful schooner. We are talking 3 or 4 towering masts, intricate rigging, and it's fully deployed with these pure, pristine white sails.
But the sails aren't just catching the northeast wind, are they?
No, they are catching fire.
And I think it's important to note, this is not a slow smolder.
No, not at all.
It is not, a lantern tipped over in the galley that gradually spreads across the deck.
Right, spontaneous.
Spontaneous, roaring, brilliant, white-hot combustion. The entire vessel is just suddenly engulfed in a sheer wall of flame.
Which illuminates that churning ocean around it with this horrific, unnatural daylight. It is this image of absolute catastrophe projected right against the black canvas of the night.
And here is where the image turns from merely destructive to deeply, viscerally disturbing.
Yeah, this is the part that gets me.
As the flames roar higher, licking up those towering masts and completely devouring the canvas, you realize the ship is not empty.
Right. You can see the people.
You can see the distinct silhouetted outlines of a phantom crew, and they are desperate. You can clearly see them scrambling, frantically climbing the rigging, trying to escape the inferno that is rapidly consuming the deck beneath their feet.
I want you to put yourself on that freezing shore for a second. Or imagine watching this from the deck of another boat, miles away. You are bearing witness to the most agonizing, terrifying final moments of these sailors' lives.
It's unbearable to watch.
It is. You are watching human beings burn to death in a floating hell, and you cannot do a single thing to stop it. And yet the ship never actually turns to ash.
No, it doesn't.
The flames roar, the men scramble, the heat seems almost palpable even from a massive distance, but the wooden vessel is never consumed.
The structure remains entirely intact. It's just trapped in this continuous agonizing loop.
Like time is broken.
Yes. The physical laws of combustion seem to be totally suspended, replaced by a visual nightmare that just refuses to reach a conclusion. What you're describing is a phenomenon that has been carved deeply and permanently into the cultural and psychological bedrock of the Canadian Maritimes.
Which brings us perfectly to the mission of our deep dive today. We are pulling from a really massive stack of source materials for this one. Oh, absolutely massive. We have historical records dating back centuries. We've got encyclopedic archives, generations of local folklore, and even cutting-edge maritime hydrographic data. We are investigating a 200-year-old maritime nightmare, the ghost ship of the Northumberland Strait.
And we need to make our approach to this explicitly clear right out of the gate.
Yes, absolutely. We're not treating this like some spooky campfire tale designed to, scare kids away from the docks at night.
Far from it. This is an enduring, meticulously documented phenomenon.
It really is. It has haunted generations of seasoned, deeply cynical sailors. It has provoked incredibly dangerous real-life rescue missions where grown men risked their lives for people who didn't even exist.
And it has completely baffled atmospheric scientists and meteorologists for well over a century.
So our goal today is to examine the actual anatomy of this terror. We're going to decode the eyewitness accounts, analyze the environmental factors, and really try to understand what happens when extreme human vulnerability meets the overwhelming, incomprehensible power of the ocean.
Because knowledge becomes most valuable when we apply it to understand why certain images or events hold such a relentless grip on our collective psyche.
Yeah, why this one story, right?
Exactly. We need to look at the intersection of history, meteorology, and human psychology to unravel why this specific horror, a beautifully rigged ship bursting into unquenchable flames, has survived for 2 centuries in one very specific stretch of water.
It forces us to confront the limitations of our own senses, honestly, and the terrifying reality of the maritime world. When I look at this phenomenon, it feels less like a traditional ghost story to me.
What does it feel like?
It feels much more like a recurring fever dream that an entire coastline somehow shares. Like, it is a terrifying loop of tragedy that you are forced to witness, but you can never, ever intervene to stop.
Right.
It feels almost vindictive. It's like the ocean is projecting a horror documentary onto the fog, specifically to remind you of who is actually in charge out there.
Framing it as an environmental projection of horror is a very, very accurate way to approach the psychology of these sightings.
I think so.
Before we delve into the atmospheric physics, or even the hydrographic mapping of the seafloor, we must look the monster directly in the eye. We have to establish exactly what generations of onlookers from the 1800s to the present day have been forced to witness in the dark.
Right. We have to understand the anatomy of the phantom first.
Exactly. Let's break down that anatomy.
So the sources we have, and this is heavily documented in encyclopedic records and extensive local lore, they show that this legend is well over 200 years old.
We are looking at sightings that date back to the early 1800s.
Which is crucial context. I mean, this is long before mass media. It's long before internet forums could spread some localized urban legend across the globe.
Long before electricity even illuminated these coastal towns.
Yes, and despite that, the visual signature is incredibly distinct and shockingly consistent across decades of reports. The vessel is almost always described as a schooner.
Specifically with 3 or 4 masts and those pure white sails.
And then, of course, the spontaneous fire. But the horror of this cycle actually goes beyond just the burning of the hull. The ship does not just sit there and blaze in the water. It goes through a terrifying metamorphosis.
It does. The lore passed down by local fishermen adds a profoundly disturbing layer to the timeline of the sighting.
And these are the guys who know the water best.
Right. These are men who are arguably the most intimately familiar with the moods and the optical tricks of these waters. They aren't easily fooled.
I know.
And they report that the ship burns, the crew scrambles in the rigging, and then the vessel inevitably begins to sink beneath the freezing waves.
But it doesn't end there.
No, the terror does not end when the water claims the hull. According to these generational accounts, once the burning ship slips beneath the surface, the fire does not extinguish.
Which is crazy.
The inferno separates into 3 distinct fireballs.
3 fireballs glowing underwater, which, based on absolutely everything we understand about the basic physics of fire, is completely impossible.
It defies all physical logic. These 3 distinct, brilliantly glowing orbs burn beneath the surface of the black water, illuminating the depths in this sickly, fiery hue.
I can literally picture that eerie glow under the dark waves.
And then, inexplicably, they begin to rise.
They come back up.
Yes. They reform. They merge back together as they break the surface, the ship's structure materializes again, and the torturous cycle of spontaneous combustion, panic, and sinking repeats itself from the absolute beginning.
God, the repetition is what makes it so deeply unsettling to me.
It's Sisyphean.
Yes, it is endless, inescapable torture. I try to think about the psychological mechanism at play here. Why does this specific vision terrify people so deeply?
Because it's not just a weird light.
Exactly. If you see a weird light in the sky, you might just be confused. But this specific manifestation, a burning ship with screaming people, it triggers something else entirely.
It plays on our absolute deepest, most primal empathetic fears. Well, watching fellow human beings burn alive is universally horrifying. It triggers a profound instinctual terror in our own nervous system.
Right, because of mirror neurons.
Precisely. We possess mirror neurons that literally make us wince when we see someone else in pain. Witnessing a roaring inferno to consuming human figures pushes that empathetic response into total overdrive.
But then you compound that visceral horror with the physical barrier of the ocean.
Exactly. You are watching this horrific suffering, and you are utterly, completely powerless to intervene. The expanse of freezing black water strips away all of your agency.
You can't throw them a rope.
You can't douse the flames. You are forced into the role of a helpless spectator to ultimate agony.
And it is not just the visual trauma of watching the men burn, either. It's what the ship represents to the people of the Maritimes. It acts as this horrible harbinger of doom. It is a curse in the form of a warning.
The folklore specifically notes that this phantom ship is known to appear almost exclusively against a northeast wind.
And a northeast wind is bad news.
In the Maritimes, a strong northeast wind is rarely a benign weather pattern. It is very often the leading edge of a brutal, punishing storm system, a nor'easter that brings freezing rain, blinding snow, and treacherous, massive swells.
So the ship doesn't just scare you visually in the moment, it weaponizes the weather.
Yes, it serves as a supernatural forewarning of impending natural devastation. It adds a thick, suffocating layer of dread for literally any sailor or coastal resident who sees it.
You see the burning ship and, with absolute chilling certainty that violence is coming for you next. The sea is announcing its intentions.
Let me explore the origins of these details for a moment, because I want to look at this through the lens of human psychology under extreme duress.
Okay, let's do that.
I think about the historical context of a 19th century sailor. These were men living incredibly hard, punishing lives.
Unbrutal lives.
They were dealing with scurvy, severe malnutrition, chronic sleep deprivation, and the sheer crushing isolation of being out on the water in the pitch black for weeks or months at a time.
So their baseline state is already one of extreme stress.
Exactly. So if I am out there freezing, exhausted, and my brain is practically melting from sensory deprivation, and I see an inexplicable glowing light out in the dark, my brain is going to be desperate to make sense of it.
Because the human mind hates a vacuum.
It despises a vacuum.
Right.
We experience pareidolia. We look at clouds and see faces. We look at shadows in our bedroom and see monsters.
Right.
If a 19th century sailor sees a weird, undulating column of light on the ocean, it makes total sense to me that his exhausted, terrified brain simply fills in the gaps.
His brain says, I know the ocean. The only thing that glows like that out here is a ship on fire.
Therefore, that light must be a ship, and those flickering shadows must be dying men.
You are describing the evolutionary biology of pareidolia perfectly. Our brains are hardwired as pattern recognition machines.
We evolved to recognize human forms and faces as a survival mechanism, right? To spot a predator in the brush or a friend in the dark. Yes. And out on the desolate, featureless ocean, there are very few visual reference points. If a sailor sees a column of light or a strange atmospheric reflection, their mind is already saturated with the very real, everyday, paralyzing fear of a ship fire.
Because fire on a wooden sailing vessel in the 1800s was just a guaranteed death sentence. There was literally nowhere to run.
Nowhere. So the brain automatically superimposes the image of a burning schooner and a screaming crew onto that ambiguous stimulus. The brain constructs a narrative, however horrifying, to explain the incomprehensible. A known horror is often easier for the mind to process than an unknown anomaly.
It is literally the mind deciding that it prefers a terrifying explanation over no explanation at all. Like, I don't know what that physics-defying light is, so it must be a ghost ship full of damned souls. It's somehow a more comfortable narrative to a 19th century sailor than The universe is full of glowing things I cannot understand or control.
Exactly.
But here is the thing that stops me from just completely dismissing this entire phenomenon as exhausted men seeing things in the dark.
What's that?
It is very easy to write off a vision as a trick of the eye or psychological projection if you are safe on the shore, sitting in a warm parlor having a cup of tea.
Sure.
But the true visceral horror of the Northumberland ghost ship is its ability to reach out and pull people into the dark. It actively draws people out into those freezing waters. It forces them to become participants in the nightmare.
Yes, it does. And the incident that most profoundly illustrates that dangerous pull is the event in Charlottetown Harbor.
Let's talk about that. The year is 1900, and I want to really take our time and set the scene here because this is where the legend crosses from just folklore into documented maritime terror.
It's a terrifying escalation.
A group of seasoned sailors are spending the evening in Charlottetown Harbor, Prince Edward Island. It is night. The water in the harbor is frigid, reflecting the ink-black sky. And out there in the distance, cutting through the gloom, they see it, the blazing ship.
But they do not react to it as a ghost.
No, they don't. They do not see a supernatural harbinger of doom or a trick of the light. They see a real, tangible vessel. They see real wood, real canvas, and real men burning to death right in their harbor.
Understanding their mindset in this exact moment is absolutely critical. These were not superstitious townspeople gasping from a bedroom window. These were maritime professionals.
Guys who lived and died by the water.
Yes. And the Brotherhood of the Sea operates on an ancient, unbreakable code. If you see a vessel in distress, you drop everything and you go.
No questions asked.
You do not hesitate. You risk your own life to save them because you know with absolute certainty that they would do the exact same for you if the roles were reversed. It is literally the only safety net that exists on the water.
So believing it to be a real ship in catastrophic distress, they spring into action. And we have to remember, they do not have a motorized Coast Guard cutter with floodlights and heated cabins.
No, they have a small, open, wooden rowboat.
Right. They board this tiny boat, they grab the heavy wooden oars, and they desperately race out into the freezing harbor to save this burning crew.
Let us reconstruct this rescue attempt minute by minute because the sensory and psychological experience of this event is just harrowing.
I want you to put yourself in that small wooden boat. You are one of these sailors. You have just jumped into an unstable craft in the pitch dark. You grab the heavy, splintered wooden oars. The water of the harbor is freezing.
Every single time the blade of the oar strikes the surface, freezing spray kicks up.
And that salt water stings your face, it crystallizes on your eyelashes, and it instantly soaks straight through your heavy wool clothing.
The cold is immediate, biting, and incredibly dangerous. But you are barely registering the temperature because your adrenaline is absolutely surging. Your body is in a state of high alert.
You are rowing as hard as humanly possible. Your muscles are just burning with lactic acid. Your lungs are screaming as they pull in that freezing night air. You are pulling with everything you have because every second you waste is another sailor burning to death.
You are fighting the current, fighting the chop of the water, and your eyes are fixed dead ahead on this towering inferno. You can literally see the flames roaring into the night sky, casting these chaotic, dancing shadows across the waves.
And as you draw closer, your mind begins to anticipate the physical realities of a massive fire.
You unconsciously brace yourself for the blast of radiant heat that should be washing over the water from a wooden ship consumed by flames.
You might even start to imagine you can smell it. The acrid smoke, the boiling pitch, the burning tar, the charring oak.
You are preparing yourself for the horrific, traumatic task ahead. You are steeling your nerves to reach into freezing water and pull out badly burned, screaming men. You are preparing for the smell of burnt flesh. You are rowing directly into a nightmare.
They're putting absolutely everything on the line. They are pushing their bodies to the breaking point, rowing into hell to save complete strangers. They cover the distance. They get there.
They reach the exact coordinates. They pull the oars. The boat glides up to the exact spot where this towering inferno should be towering over them. And in an instant, the entire ship simply vanishes into the mist.
Just gone.
Complete and utter evaporation. The physical and emotional anticlimax of this moment is profoundly disturbing.
The sudden shift in atmosphere gives me chills just thinking about it. Think about the sensory whiplash.
It would be staggering.
You go from this chaotic, adrenaline-fueled, blood-pumping rush of a rescue mission. You are ready to be a hero. You are ready for trauma. Your ears are anticipating the roar of the fire and the screams of dying men. And then suddenly there is just total Eerie, deafening silence.
Nothing.
The roaring flames are gone. There is no radiant heat warming your frozen face. There is no choking smoke in the air.
There are no screaming sailors thrashing in the water.
There is only the absolute dark, the freezing fog rolling off the harbor, the lonely sound of water slapping against the wooden side of your tiny rowboat, and the creeping, sickening realization that you're just chasing a ghost.
The psychological whiplash of that moment would be devastating to a rational mind. It violently strips away your consensus reality.
You'd feel crazy.
You are left floating in the absolute blackness, questioning your own sanity, your own senses, and entirely vulnerable to whatever unseen force just tricked you into rowing out into the lethal dark.
It is incredibly cruel. The analogy that comes to my mind is this. Imagine you are walking down a quiet street at night, and you see a house on fire. The flames are shooting out the windows, and you hear a child screaming inside.
So you don't even think, you just act.
Exactly. You just react. You run headfirst into the burning building. You are kicking down doors. You are risking your life, fighting your way through the blinding smoke, coughing, burning your hands. You locate the bedroom. You kick down the final door to save the child, and you step into an empty, freezing, dark room.
Oh, wow.
There is no fire. There is no child. It highlights the absolute cruelest aspect of this legend. It preys on the courage and the humanity of sailors. It uses their very best traits, their bravery, their empathy, their selfless willingness to save a life as bait, to drag them out into the freezing dark.
It is a profound violation of the Maritime Code of Honor. The entity, or the phenomenon, uses their honor against them, and it leaves a lasting psychological scar.
They had to live with that.
The historical accounts tell us that those men turned their small boat around and rowed back to the shore of Charlottetown in complete silence. They were forever changed by what they did not find out there in the dark.
Now, if we were looking for a neat, comfortable narrative, it would be really comforting to just close the book right there. In the year 1900,
It would be, yes.
we could easily comfort ourselves by thinking, oh, this is just a Victorian-era superstition. Back then, they didn't have high-powered electric coastal lighting. They didn't have advanced radar systems. Of course, a bunch of exhausted sailors got confused by some weirdly illuminated fog.
We like to think we're past that.
Right, we like to think of ourselves as modern, sophisticated people who have conquered the night. We have GPS, we have satellite imaging, we have smartphones with high-definition cameras in our pockets. The ghosts of the 19th century should have been chased away by the blinding light of modernity.
But they haven't been.
No, they haven't. And that terrifying truth, the reason we are dedicating so much time to this deep dive, is that the darkness hasn't left the Northumberland Strait, and neither has the ship.
The persistence of this phenomenon into the 21st century is what elevates this from historical curiosity to an ongoing mystery. This is not a dead legend confined to dusty, moth-eaten historical archives.
No, it's happening now.
It is a living, breathing part of the modern coastal experience in the Maritimes.
Let's jump the timeline forward to just a few years ago. January 2008. A 17-year-old guy named Mathieu Giguère reports a sighting to a local newspaper.
Okay.
He is looking out over Tatamagouche Bay, an area with a long history of these sightings, and he describes seeing a bright white and gold ship right there in the freezing water.
And he's specific about the colors.
Very specific. This isn't described as a vague blur or a trick of the fog. He notes the distinct, brilliant colors, the intense brightness of the gold and white light.
Wow.
And then, in October of that exact same year, 2008, a resident of Tatamagouche Mountain named Melvin Lungiel also claims to see it one night.
What would she say?
The quote he gave to the local paper is just so chilling in its simple, tired resignation. He just says, I believe in all that stuff, and I don't know what else it would be.
That quote perfectly encapsulates how deeply ingrained this fear is in the maritime consciousness, even today.
Yeah, he just accepts it.
The collision of the modern, hyper-connected world with ancient, primal terror is fascinating. Here we are in 2008 and beyond. We have advanced radar systems sweeping the strait constantly. We have thermal imaging. We have commercial flights passing overhead.
We have so much data.
And yet, a modern teenager and a local resident are still stopped dead in their tracks by the exact same vision that terrified men in wooden rowboats 2 centuries ago. The technology has not mitigated the visceral, paralyzing impact of the sighting.
Which raises a really philosophical question for me. Why hasn't our technology chased away these ghosts?
It's a great question.
If we are so incredibly advanced, why are we still seeing a 19th century schooner burning in the bay? Does part of the human psyche secretly crave this? Are we, as a modern society, somehow secretly desperate to be reminded of how vast and uncontrollable the ocean truly is?
Like a reality check.
Exactly. Do we need the ghost ship to shatter our arrogance, to remind us that we aren't gods just because we have a GPS screen on our dashboard?
There is a profound truth in that perspective. Modern technology creates a very dangerous illusion of mastery over nature. We look at a radar screen, we see green sweeps over a black background, and we believe we know everything that is happening in the dark.
We think we're safe.
We believe we have tamed the environment. But the ocean is fundamentally indifferent to our technology. It remains a wild, untamable, lethal abyss.
Yeah.
Sightings like the ghost ship, whether they are ultimately proven to be supernatural manifestations or highly complex natural anomalies, they serve as a humbling mechanism. They
Right.
violently shatter that illusion of control.
They really do.
They remind us that there are still mysteries out there in the dark that our instruments cannot quantify, that our cameras cannot neatly capture, and that the natural world is far more complex, deceptive, and terrifying than a simple blip on a digital screen.
It is like the ocean itself is mocking us, saying, you think your satellite keeps you safe from the dark, watch this. But if people are continually seeing this specific ship burn over and over again across hundreds of years, we have to ask the most chilling question of this entire investigation.
The big one.
Is this an echo of an actual historical tragedy? Is there a physical, rotting graveyard beneath the freezing water that is actively feeding this legend? Is the ocean replaying a specific trauma?
That inquiry leads us directly to a startling modern discovery, one that suddenly and violently bridges the gap between ethereal, spoken folklore and physical, historical reality. We have to examine what was actually found beneath the surface of the strait.
Let's get into it. In 2015, the Canadian Hydrographic Service was conducting a routine survey. And I want to explain how this works, because they're not just driving a boat around and looking over the side with a flashlight.
No, it's highly technical.
They use multi-beam sonar. They send acoustic pulses down into the pitch-black depths, and the echoes bounce back, painting a highly detailed 3D topographic map of the ocean floor.
It's literally mapping with sound.
Right. And they were mapping the floor of Pictou Harbor, Nova Scotia, which is right in the heart of the geographical area where these sightings occur. And the sonar returned something completely unexpected.
What did they find?
Sitting upright on the seafloor, in about 12 to 15 meters of water, so relatively shallow, just out of sight beneath the murky surface, they found an unidentified 60-meter or 200-foot wooden shipwreck.
A massive forgotten structure just resting silently in the silt, right beneath the waters where the Phantom is seen.
But the physical details of this wreck are what make the blood run cold. When they analyzed this physical, tangible shipwreck, they noted it featured large, intact wooden propellers.
Which is very specific.
Very. And horrifically, when they examined the structure closely, they found distinct, undeniable signs of severe fire damage. The wood was charred. The ship had burned before it sank.
The implications of finding a burnt wooden wreck in that exact location force us to connect the physical evidence to the broader tapestry of the legend. This 2015 discovery anchors the ghost story in brutal, undeniable physical reality.
It's not just a story anymore.
For centuries, there have been various origin myths circulating in the Maritimes, trying to explain why the ship is burning. One prominent historical theory links the Phantom to a real vessel called the Young Teaser.
Oh, I've read about this one.
This was an American privateer ship operating during the War of 1812. The historical record shows that the Young Teaser was cornered by British warships. Rather than face capture and hanging, a desperate crew member, or perhaps an officer driven mad by the stress, threw fire into the ship's powder magazine or cargo hold.
Just blew it up intentionally.
The resulting explosion was catastrophic. It blew the ship apart, killing almost everyone on board in a horrific, instantaneous fire.
A literal floating inferno born out of the absolute desperation and violence of war.
A sudden, violent end. Another very persistent myth in the region says the Phantom was a doomed emigrant ship from Scotland.
The Highland clearances.
Yes. During the Highland clearances, thousands of Scots were forced onto incredibly cramped, unsafe vessels to seek a new life in North America. These ships were packed with families incredibly vulnerable to disease, weather, and disaster. The legend states that one of these ships caught fire and sank in the dark before it ever reached its destination of Pictou, Nova Scotia.
And Pictou Harbor is exactly where the Canadian Hydrographic Service found that burnt wooden wreck in 2015.
The geographical alignment is chilling. The trauma of an emigrant ship burning within sight of their promised land is unimaginably awful.
And there are others too, right?
There are other myths too, darker ones. Tales of a pirate vessel torn apart by a fiery, violent brawl among the crew, mutiny and murder, resulting in the ship burning to the waterline as the crew slaughtered each other.
A literal bloodbath on fire.
Or a tragic tale of a doomed merchant ship lost in a sudden storm because the crew was below deck, drunken and negligent. In their stupor, they allowed a lantern to tip over, igniting the dry timbers and pitch, burning the vessel while they were trapped below decks in the dark.
When I look at all of these myths, the privateer, the emigrant ship, the pirates, the drunk sailors, they all have a very dark common thread. Hubris, human error, violence.
Tragedy.
They all revolve around the unforgiving nature of the sea. The ocean punishes human mistakes, arrogance, and cruelty with absolute uncompromising finality.
It doesn't forgive. Never. Whether it is the hubris of war, the negligence of a drunken crew, the cruelty of pirates, or simply the tragic bad luck of emigrants, the ocean is the ultimate executioner. The mention of actual fire damage on that sunken ship in Pictou Harbor suddenly makes these myths feel less like moralistic fairy tales and much more like historical documentation of real, agonizing suffering.
I hear the connections, and they are definitely eerie, but I am going to push back on the neatness of these historical explanations just a little bit.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I like a good solved mystery as much as anyone. But the forensic evidence here does not quite fit perfectly with the legend. Let's think critically about the 2015 wreck.
Okay, let's look at the details.
It is 60 meters long, and crucially, it has large wooden propellers. That suggests a steam-assisted vessel. It suggests something slightly more industrial, perhaps from the late 19th or early 20th century. But the Vision, the ghost ship that people have seen consistently for 200 years, dating back in the early 1800s, is always described as a 3 or 4-masted schooner with white sails, a classic wind-powered sailing ship. The physical body buried in the underwater graveyard does not actually match the ghost walking the halls above.
That is a very critical discrepancy. The timeline and the technology do not align perfectly.
It makes me think of an analogy. Imagine you are walking through the deep woods and you find an unmarked grave. You exhume the remains, you run a DNA test, and you realize the bones belong to a middle-aged logger who died of a heart attack in 1950.
Right.
But the locals in the nearby town swear that every full moon they see the ghost of a crying Victorian child roaming those exact trees. The phantom does not match the physical trauma site. The haunting is disconnected from the forensic reality.
That's a great point.
To me, this suggests something even more unsettling about the Northumberland Strait. Maybe the ghost ship isn't the restless spirit of one specific, literal shipwreck.
What else could it be?
Maybe the ocean itself is just a massive dark canvas, and human guilt, historical tragedies, the fear of fire, and the collective trauma of living on the coast all just bleed together into this one archetypal nightmare image. The burning ship is a monument to all the souls lost to fire and freezing water in that strait. It is an aggregate ghost.
Viewing the phenomenon as an aggregate ghost is a profoundly eerie way to conceptualize it.
It makes sense to me, though.
It does. The environment itself absorbs the trauma of centuries of maritime disaster, the countless lives lost to the freezing dark, and reflects it back at us in a singular symbolic form. It speaks to the immense psychological weight the ocean carries for coastal communities. The sea is a mass grave, and the burning ship is the marker.
But, while historians and hydrographers are looking down into the water for physical wrecks, trying to map the seafloor, atmospheric scientists are looking up into the sky.
Trying to find a rational answer.
Exactly. They are trying to find a rational, physical, meteorological explanation for this recurring light. But as we unpack the science, I think we are going to find that the scientific explanations might actually be more unsettling and more terrifying than the supernatural ones.
Science brings us into the cold light of rationality, but in the Northumberland Strait, the laws of rationality can produce deeply disturbing illusions.
It really can.
The leading scientific explanation for the burning ship is a complex optical phenomenon known as a fata morgana.
I was looking into the meteorological data for the Maritimes in winter to try and understand this. My understanding of the fata morgana theory is that it is essentially the sky building a giant, distorted funhouse mirror over the ocean.
That's a very good way to picture it.
But how exactly does the atmosphere pull off a trick on that massive scale?
A fata morgana is a very specific type of complex superior mirage. It requires highly specific atmospheric conditions to form, which happen to be quite common in the Northumberland Strait during the colder months. It is all about atmospheric density and the refraction of light. It happens most frequently when you have a strong temperature inversion.
So normally air gets colder the higher up you go,
Yeah.
but an inversion flips that.
Precisely. In a temperature inversion over the ocean, you have a layer of incredibly cold, dense air sitting directly on the surface of the freezing water.
Just hugging the waves.
Exactly. Resting directly on top of that cold air is a layer of significantly warmer, less dense air, often brought in by a shifting weather front. Because these layers have vastly different temperatures and densities, they interact with light differently.
They bend it.
Yes, when light passes through these stratified layers, it bends, it refracts. The cold, dense air near the water acts like a massive, warped, unpredictable atmospheric lens.
So if I am standing on the shore, the light entering my eyes has been bent and stretched by this massive lens over the water.
Yes. What happens is that this atmospheric lens takes an image of a perfectly normal distant object that is actually located well over the horizon.
Like what?
Maybe a regular fishing boat miles away, or even just a set of bright coastal lights from a distant town on the opposite shore. The Fata Morgana catches the light from that object, bends it over the curve of the Earth, and projects it forward.
That is wild.
But it does not just project it, it reflects it, distorts it, and magnifies it immensely.
It takes a normal point of light and stretches it vertically into a towering structure.
Exactly. It projects a highly distorted, towering, shimmering image across the horizon, making it appear as though it is suspended slightly above the water.
And it moves too, right?
Oh, yes, because the air layers are never perfectly still. They are constantly moving, undulating, mixing slightly at the boundary. The projected image shimmers and dances violently. To the human eye, this vertical, dancing, bright yellow and white light looks exactly like leaping, roaring flames consuming a tall structure.
So from an optical physics standpoint, a Fata Morgana can take the light from a lighthouse 30 miles away, bend it through freezing air, and project it right in front of you so it looks exactly like a three-masted schooner burning to death.
That is the optical reality. Your eyes are seeing light, but the atmosphere is lying to you about the source and the shape.
Wow.
But the Fata Morgana is not the only scientific theory in play. In 1905, a prominent New Brunswick scientist and historian named William Francis Ganom proposed another natural explanation, focusing not on light refraction, but on electricity.
Electricity.
He suggested the sightings were actually intense manifestations of St. Elmo's fire.
St. Elmo's fire. We hear about this in aviation and maritime lore a lot. It is that glowing electrical discharge, like rubbing your socks on the carpet and touching a doorknob, but scaled up to an apocalyptic level.
That is a perfect analogy for the underlying mechanism. St. Elmo's fire is a weather phenomenon where luminous plasma is created by a coronal discharge.
Okay, break down coronal discharge for me.
It happens when you have a sharp, pointed object, like a ship's mast, sitting in a strong electrical field in the atmosphere, such as the charged air just before a major thunderstorm or winter gale. Ganon theorized that an actual, physical, non-burning ship sailing through the strait during these highly charged atmospheric conditions could become a conduit.
And remember, the ghost ship lore specifically says it appears before a violent storm.
Exactly. So the electrical field of the incoming storm is so strong that it interacts with the physical ship.
The field rips electrons off the air molecules around the ship's rigging.
Yes. This creates a glowing corona of plasma. Suddenly, a wooden ship has its entire rigging, all its towering masts, its ropes, its yards glowing intensely with this bright, crackling, blue-white electrical discharge.
And from a distance, in the pitch black of the ocean, a ship covered in glowing plasma will look exactly like a phantom vessel completely ablaze, yet mysteriously never burning down.
It would look identical to the legend.
And there are other theories in the meteorological textbooks too. Things like banks of dense sea fog forming specific shapes and perfectly catching and reflecting the moonlight, creating a luminescent ship. Or even geographical confusion, where people are conflating this sighting with another famous local phenomenon, the fire ship of Baie des Chaleurs, further north.
They're trying everything.
It really feels like scientists are desperately throwing every single atmospheric explanation they can find at this phenomenon to make it make sense.
They are attempting to impose rational order on an environment that feels chaotic and terrifying. The physics of a Fata Morgana or the electrical realities of St. Elmo's fire are completely rational, verifiable, natural processes. They offer a comforting framework.
But here is my pushback on that comfort. And I really want you, the listener, to think about this the next time you look out at the ocean. People often use science to comfort themselves in the dark, you know. They say, oh, thank God it is not a ghost. It is just a superior mirage caused by a temperature inversion. I can go to sleep now, the world makes sense. But I argue that this scientific reality is fundamentally, existentially more terrifying than a ghost story.
How do you mean? Why is the physics more frightening than the paranormal?
Because if the Fata Morgana theory is true, it means that nature is playing a malevolent, actively cruel trick on human beings.
Right.
Think back to those sailors in Charlottetown Harbor in 1900. The men who risked their lives rowing into the freezing dark. If what they saw was a mirage, it means the sky, the cold air, and the freezing ocean literally conspired, using the blind, unfeeling laws of physics and optics to project a hyper-realistic illusion of men burning to death, specifically to mess with their heads. It means the environment itself is a hostile house of mirrors designed to break your sanity. If the natural world can manufacture a 200-foot burning phantom out of thin air, project it into the night, and use your own empathy to trick you into rowing out into lethal freezing waters, doesn't that make the natural world feel infinitely more alien, predatory, and horrifying than a simple ghost story?
That is a chilling, profound perspective. You are framing the atmosphere not as a passive background, but as an active antagonist.
It is an antagonist.
It is a machine that weaponizes light, air, and temperature to exploit human empathy and fear. It removes the comforting narrative of a tragic supernatural spirit and replaces it with the cold, unfeeling cruelty of physics. It means you cannot trust your own eyes. You cannot trust the horizon. The world itself is fundamentally deceptive.
Exactly. I would almost rather be a ghost. At least a ghost has a human motive. A ghost implies that human consciousness survives death. A ghost is a tragedy we can understand.
We can contextualize a ghost.
Right. A Fata Morgana is just the universe proving that it does not care about you at all, and that it will use your own eyes to kill you. Whether it is a cruel trick of the freezing air-bending light, the glowing, crackling electrical plasma of St. Elmo's fire warning of a storm, or the restless, burning spirits of a wooden wreck sitting in the silt of Pictou Harbor, one thing is absolutely undeniable.
What's that?
The ghost ship of the Northumberland Strait has successfully burned its way deep into the cultural bedrock of the Maritimes.
It has transcended mere local gossip or a fisherman's tall tale. It has become a permanent, indelible fixture in the artistic, historical, and cultural identity of the region. It is a shared nightmare that literally defines the coastline.
It really has.
Yeah.
This legend has been heavily immortalized in Canadian pop culture, proving that the fear it inspires is completely universal. For example, the acclaimed Canadian singer-songwriter Lenny Gallant, who's actually from Prince Edward Island and knows these waters intimately, he released a very famous song in 1988 on his album Breakwater.
Oh, I know this one.
The track is called Tales of the Phantom Ship, and the lyrics directly channel the raw terror and the sensory overload of the eyewitness accounts. He sings, "There's a burst of flame and a flash of light, and there on the tide is a frightening sight, as a tall ship all aflame lights up the sky, from truck to keel in flames." He captures that sudden, violent ignition in the dark perfectly.
The fact that a folk song can evoke such a visceral emotional reaction decades after it was written shows how deeply this imagery resonates with people. It is not just a song. It functions as an oral history of a shared terror. It is a way for the community to process the danger of the ocean.
And its reach goes beyond just local music. In June 2014, Canada Post actually issued a special postage stamp commemorating the Northumberland Strait ghost ship.
A stamp.
Yeah. And they leaned heavily into the dark folklore. They specifically issued it on Friday the 13th as part of a Canadian ghost story series. It has also been referenced in modern horror fiction, appearing in the popular supernatural podcast Alice Isn't Dead. The culture just refuses to let the ship extinguish.
And if we step back at the end of this deep dive and summarize why this enduring, obsessive fascination exists, I believe it lies in our most primal, ancient fear of the ocean itself.
Absolutely.
Despite all our modern shipping lanes, our coastal cities, our sonar, and our radar, the sea remains an abyss. It is a vast, unfeeling void that can swallow human ambition, massive technological achievements, and human life without leaving a single trace.
Just swallows it whole.
The burning ship is a blazing beacon reminding us of that vulnerability. It represents the ultimate nightmare scenario, being utterly isolated, trapped between the fatal, contradictory elements of roaring fire and freezing water, with absolutely no hope of rescue.
It is the ultimate horror. Fire and ice and no way out. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought.
I think they're ready for it.
I want you to close your eyes and imagine it is tonight. You have traveled to the coast. You are standing completely alone on the freezing, windswept shore of the Northumberland Strait. You look out into the absolute, crushing blackness of the ocean. The wind bites at your face. And suddenly, out in the void, a light catches fire.
It starts small.
But the flames roar upwards, the massive ship materializes from the fog, the phantom crew begins their desperate, screaming climb up the rigging. The true terror in that moment isn't the possibility that you are looking at a ghost.
No.
The true terror is the realization of how utterly helpless, isolated, and insignificant you are if it turns out to be real.
You are nothing but a fragile witness to the overwhelming power of the dark.
Thank you for braving these dark, freezing waters with us today, and for exploring the terrifying anatomy of this maritime nightmare. Until next time, keep questioning the shadows on the horizon.